Hello, and welcome to Life is a Piano, episode 3. Today we're going to be talking with Rufus Ferguson, a wonderful keyboard player who divides his time between Kalamazoo and Detroit and is involved in a lot of roles as a performer, educator, and, all around proficient artist in the Michigan music scene. I first met him when I started studying at Western Michigan University. We were both pursuing our masters at the same time, so it was great to catch up with him and see what he's up to. If you like any part of today's conversation, you can head on over to patreon.com/Dutcher Snedeker, where you can support podcasts like these. There are different tiers to show your level of support. Each tier offers different pieces of content, whether it's early audio or video versions of the podcasts I'm producing, and it offers the opportunity to hire me as an instructor, a recording artist, or a consultant. Thanks again, and make sure to check out the links on how you can support Rufus Ferguson after the podcast. And special shout out to Anchor.fm, a great service that is distributing all of the podcast's audio episodes to various platforms. Now, enjoy today's episode. I felt like not like an "I told you so" moment, because who knows who ever thought a pandemic would happen. But like, when some people were, they're like, "Hey man, you're a good player. Like, you should just like focus on that. Like, get really good at that." And I like the kind of people who they have their main focus, but they also they kind of know how to run sound. They know how to be a good studio musician. They look at other parts of the business. So it was, it's been tricky, but it's also been good to just kind of activate other parts of what I do to keep things moving.
Yeah, now's the time to do it, and the good thing is these skills will last us throughout our career. So, it's great.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, there really isn't an official intro to the podcast. So, yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast though.
Yeah. Is it like a video podcast or is it just
video and audio?
Nice.
A lot of the podcasts I tend to follow have both elements. I mean, I do listen to audio only ones, and I do see ones that are only on like YouTube or something.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of the visual kind of adding another layer of to the conversation and all that.
Activate some more senses, man.
Yeah. And I see all these people who, I just found out about Anchor.fm, this service that partnered with Spotify, or Spotify bought it, I guess. But just to have something that kind of throws out a podcast to most of the platforms.
Right. That's great.
Just makes things easier.
I know, right? You don't have to do it.
Yeah. I have to copy a feed and post it to 10 places.
Right.
But yeah, it's the idea. It kind of came from, as I was thinking of podcasts, Mitten Backstage is kind of we'll call it the flagship of musicians talking to musicians, and I can pick a musician or someone in the industry and talk to them. But there's not a lot of conversations, at least that I've heard. There's interviews with keyboard players, and there's keyboard players they might be in a collaboration together and have a little bit of time on camera, but keyboardists have kind of a unique position in the music industry.
Oh yeah. We can talk about that forever.
Yeah, because you especially, if I feel like you keyboard in every sense of the keyboard, like organ and piano and synths and digital things. You do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I think it's a thing of I mean, yeah. Sorry if you hear my baby in the background.
No, that's fine.
That part I can't help.
Hey, quiet back there.
You know, I don't know for jazz, and I guess we think about like traditional jazz, and a lot of my traditional jazz friends, they're piano only, and then you have like the modern cats who's like, oh, okay, I'll be piano and keyboard, But in a sense, a lot of people are just following what they see, and for me, it's like, nah, I like to just do it all, I didn't. Plus, jazz isn't really. I mean, a lot of people may know me as a jazz pianist, but that's not really what I do. I just play jazz, like.
Yeah.
I'm more of just a keyboard player, so I would much rather just like be thrown into any situation. Like, let's play a little R&B, cool. Let's go to church, cool. Like, but to be considered a jazz pianist, I mean that both of those words, it would be false to describe me. I'm not a jazz pianist, and I'm not just a pianist. So,
Yeah, I feel like I had that when I was at Western. There was that disconnect of like, okay, I'm here for a jazz masters, but I don't vibe necessarily only with jazz like academia or the jazz I'm always the kind of person who's looking at the current and forward or the recent, and then every now and again I'll dip into like this stuff that's like, okay, yeah, this guy did study this guy, let's go check out that album. But I was never the person who it's like, vibing people about a album from the 60s, a B-side live at the whatever. It's like, I don't have time. There's so many artists.
That's a whole conversation in itself. I understand the value of understanding the history of the music and everything, but I'm not one of those cats who are like about to sit here and talk about what records, like, okay, who's on this record? Hey, who's on this record? It's like, quite honestly, I mean, I see the value in understanding the language and maybe identifying characteristics of players, but I don't necessarily understand the value of sitting here quizzing everybody on what record is what and who played on what. It's like, either learn the music or don't.
Yeah, and the music, because I've always been, like, if the music's compelling enough, of course I'm going to listen to it. And,
right.
I might get stuck on it for a week or a month, or I come back to it. Like it's, I don't have to like necessarily, have someone walk me through like, this is why this guy's good. Cause I'm at a point, like where I understand music now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like now I understand why he's good. I get it. Even I was like 10 years ago, I can understand why you will want me to dig into this guy's background and do a background check on him. But now it's just like, I understand. I know what he's doing. I like what he's doing. I'll extract what I like and keep it moving, essentially.
Right. Well, in a lot of my like first, like when I remember when in middle school, when I first got it was kind of a double whammy of like my family got a family computer, like a desktop that we could use for schoolwork. And my parents got me like some SanDisk MP3 player with like 128 megabytes on it. Like just this tiny, yeah, there's just like these tiny things like, okay, you could fit maybe 10 songs. Right. But I remember that both of those things were kind of like the first steps of like, oh, I'm not just bound to like, whatever my dad's listening to on the stereo or whatever my mom's playing on the radio on the way to school. Like the first steps of like, oh, what do I like listening to? And I somehow found myself like, like learning about like, oh, you can rip CDs to computer, and you go to the library, get a stack of like 30 CDs. Oh, just good like times. Yeah.
More, I still have a lot of those like CDs that I ripped. They're somewhere floating around in my car. Not that I don't even have a CD player in my car, so I don't know why they're in my car. But yeah, then I took a Sharpie and wrote on them like, okay, this is what this is. Mental notes. So
yeah,
I don't have a blank CD. But then there's like those times where you have a bunch of blank CDs that you forgot to write on, and you're like trying to go through them like, okay, well, what's on this? Okay, cool. So what's on this one?
Wait, does this still work? Okay, it still works. Okay, I'm gonna keep listening to it.
You gotta look at the back of it. It's like, is there something on here? Oh yeah, there's something on there. Okay, let me see what this
is. Yeah, and so it was like, it was that, and then I remember meeting people at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp who kind of opened me up to some of it was more classical stuff because that was my upbringing, was classical training, and some of it was like, you know, one friend in particular, we really got into like metal music, just all different genres, and just kind of seeing like the, you know, a lot of these people aren't trained. They learn a lot of stuff just by doing it, but they're very technically proficient. And sometimes, you know, the songwriting's like, okay, it's, you know, nothing distinct. It's kind of just a barrage, and maybe they don't know how to arrange space. But it was, as a, you know, a young kid, I'm like, ooh, I want to be able to play that fast with that kind of endurance. And that's what, like, you know, helped motivate me with a very strict teacher who was like giving me all these scale exercises, like, oh, I'm gonna really like get good at my chops. But
you know, it's funny because that's the same approach I took with gospel music. Because I mean, I grew up in the gospel church, and so a lot of the stuff that the cats are playing, I mean, it's like insane. It's like they're so technically sound and have no idea that they are. You know, like their sense of harmony is like far beyond a lot of jazz musicians. Their dexterity is far beyond a lot of jazz musicians who study for years and years and years. And yet they have no idea what they're doing. And so that always fascinated me. It's like, I want to do that, but I also want to know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I think that's kind of what put me into jazz, is like, this will give me the opportunity to understand what I'm doing in church, you know? And then I just kind of got stuck playing jazz for a little while.
Yeah. Cause I even remember, like, I think the first, you know, cause one of the first times I was performing more regularly, other than like, you know, studio recitals, was in middle school. I was part of like a worship band that would do like the children's church services. So we'd do like 2 services, and my parents would be at one of the services, and they'd either teach or do some kind of class. And but then as I got into like going to youth group, they were, you know, they're always looking to, like, it was at Madison Square Church. They were always looking to like activate, like, hey kids, like, you got skills and talents, let's have you do stuff. And that's when I got linked up with Maurice Townsend for the, you know, like the Where You At Urban Youth Conference and like some other stuff. But having to kind of play, you know, with that type of live gospel band, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff I could learn. And it's just crazy how, like, it's how natural it just kind of flows, even though it's a lot of like complex stuff that people could just write about.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, and you know, another interesting thing I really like about gospel is the use of, or the mix of, electronic and acoustic instruments. You know, like, you have amazing drummers who obviously play acoustic hits, and sometimes you'll have acoustic piano for certain things, but like, there's a lot of synth work that's in gospel music. You know, it's like there's a dedicated synth guy in most big churches. It's like, okay, you play all auxiliary keys, just nothing but synths and brass and strings, and, you know, like, that's your job.
Yeah, like, just some of the sounds. I think of someone like you know, before seeing more of his posts, I would see drummers tracking to his stuff, Kyrie Tyler. And like how he's this kind of crossover, like, can arrange stuff for like Megan Thee Stallion, but then also have these like with his band, the Red Hands, it's like D'Angelo Church.
Right.
But there's all these textures that are like, it's still got that, like that through line of like, oh, these are some of the gospel tropes, instrumentation.
And you listen to stuff from like D'Angelo, and it's like, you realize, wow, like, a lot of these cats clearly have come out of the church. I mean, the soul alone, but like the musical isms that they use are clearly like, okay, that's definitely gospel. But they rework it in a way where it doesn't feel like you're in church, but it feels churchy. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I'm always curious about like the kind of evolution of like, you look at some of these modern gospel artists and you think back to the roots of the music. Like, is it because, I don't know, like part of me thinks it's like because there was, a talent pool that's kind of insulated and like they're, playing at other churches, but kind of learning from people within the church, within these certain communities, like also kind of getting to a point where, okay, we need to have some interaction, like, with introducing synthesizers and like different arrange the Kirk Franklins of the world that like have kind of one foot in
Yeah.
in both worlds. Like I've never really like looked at the history just because it seems like it's always been just talent. Like, oh, it started super talented and like spiritual and then it just kept growing and
Yeah, I'll give you a quick history lesson here. I'll try to do it in under 2 minutes. Let's see if it works. Where am I in time?
Yeah.
All right, let's see if I can do that in 2 minutes.
Right.
So essentially a lot of what's happening in gospel music today, or even in the Black church, is a lot of the things that has happened in the earlier days of the church. So when we talk about the gospel church, I mean, it started around the 1800s, but music wasn't really introduced in it until the 1900s. But in the early church, there was really nothing but piano, and at that time, acoustic piano. I mean, they weren't using any keyboards, not that they were any around like that anyway.
Right.
But, yeah, there's like, a whole montage in 1942. But it was just piano and organ, Hammond organ at that. And so as like the blues was being introduced and the jazz was being introduced, then you start to see certain churches pop up with drums and electric basses. At first, it actually started with acoustic basses. And so they're like, whoa. No, you don't bring that in here. That's very, very secular. Shame on you. You're a devil, And then, of course, like everything, it gets normalized. And then after they bring in that, then they're bringing in electric guitars. And there's like, oh, no, you can't bring that to the church. And then eventually that's normalized. And then, around the 70s, you start seeing full bands, but still with acoustic pianos. And then they're introducing electric keyboards, Rhodes and synths and all this. And again, the same thing. No, don't bring that to church. That's sacrilegious. You're going to hell for that, but essentially it all gets normalized. And so today it's the same thing. All these things that were once abandoned by church people, or not even abandoned, were crucified by church people for bringing them into the church, have now been accepted. And now they're pushing the music even further because a lot of these gospel musicians are also playing secular music. And so, like anything else, the influence is slowly coming in. And of course, you still have that group of people who are like, no, don't bring that in the church. But we're having a lot more open-minded Christians who are like, hey, what if we mix this sound and this sound? And of course, there's a whole theology behind this. Like, well, if we do this, then we can attract more people and blah, 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 which is
right.
Which is, true to an extent.
Yeah.
But I think musicians are just trying to find another way to express themselves, because a lot of us, again, come out of the church, and that's where our heart is. We love the church, but we also like playing with synths and playing with crazy harmony and crazy time signatures and doing all this stuff people may not enjoy. And so we're trying to find a way to integrate this into the church experience that's not too jarring for Christians.
Yeah, I'd say that covers a good spread
in 2 minutes.
Yeah. But yeah, that's true. Like, how many, especially I think of Michigan, like how many people have, grew up in church, like played in church, right, interacted with church musicians. Like I remember even, one of the first groups I was playing in when I got to Grand Valley was Hannah Rose and the Gravestones. And at the time, Mario Copeland was in the band. And that dude just like showed me up and down. Like he didn't know half the notes he was playing and just could write the crazy, like the stuff that I was like starting to get introduced to is like the kind of blending of like, different Black American music styles that I didn't grow up with, mixed with jazz, and also, just seeing the gospel chops in action and being like, what, how,
right.
How?
I mean, and honestly, up until recently, I don't think there's really been anybody successfully. Well, I guess that's not 100% true. I would say right now, the person who's kind of fuse these styles the most successfully is obviously Corey Henry. I mean, he's the guy who's kind of like, you hear him play and you can hear church all through his playing, but he's not writing gospel music, you know? And a lot of people say I think he is definitely a pioneer of what's going to come.
Yep.
But a lot of people forget about some of the older players who did this. They just didn't do it as
publicly
and publicly, right? So a lot of them were like, okay, I grew up in church, this is who I am. But then when they was decided to do secular music, they stopped doing church. I mean, like Billy Preston, who played with the Beatles, he was like, he's a killing gospel organist. But when the Beatles was like, hey, come play with us, he wasn't really playing gospel anymore. You know, so they kind of only did one. But people like Corey are kind of like fusing this sound, and you see him, you know, somewhere in New York playing at a nice jazz club, but you also see him at a church pop up on Sunday, you know? And they're kind of everywhere now. And I mean, he's not the only one, obviously, but, you know.
Right. Well, and I just think, you know, that infamous Lingus solo he took, as soon as he started playing, I'm like, oh, this is what you use the vocabulary for.
Yeah.
Like the movement. So like there's no, you know, the bass note or the bass line's always repeating in that solo. And he's just like, well, what if I did that? And then did a little that and then toss that in and change the synth, like just exploring. Like and moving through harmony. And
you know, that's a good point. So that's really the thing that separates gospel keyboardists from jazz keyboardists. Both can have great dexterity, both can have a great concept of soloistic structures, but the things that gospel musicians tend to lack is their experience with harmony. They have good harmonic ideas, and especially when they talk about playing progressions, they can kill it. But if you ask them to solo over these progressions, they get stuck. And that's where the knowledge of jazz kind of comes in. The jazz will teach you how to weave in and out of different chord changes that are not always linked together by functional harmony.
Right.
And gospel music is very functional.
Yes.
You know? So so I get a lot of like gospel guys who clearly are like, hey, can you show me some of the jazz things? And I'm like, honestly, you already got it. The only thing you really need to understand is how to solo over non-functional harmony.
Yep.
And, you know, find connecting notes and linking notes that connect chords. And if you can kind of start to maneuver through chords, you are a jazz keyboardist. You got everything else.
Yeah, it's such a, you know, like I remember like when Mario would write a song for like, you know, some random thing, and then, you know, my like music school being in music school brains, like, okay, he's like doing that, and that's kind of like adding the, like, he's modulating like a second there, like just trying to connect the dots.
Yeah.
And he's just looking at me like, what is that? What you just said that chord like 5 things back. What was that?
Right.
And
that's the detail though. I think that's the detail that it takes to be able to maneuver through non-functional harmony. You know, to understand that you can't play the same scale over 5 chords like you can in functional harmony. It takes that level of detail. And to an extent, it takes that level of study and mentorship that jazz it just inherently has that sometimes gospel music doesn't, or if it does, they're passing down the tradition of how to maneuver in functional harmony, and that person passes it down to the next person. But until somebody steps in and understands the role of non-functional harmony, gospel music will always keep going down that vein. So they really need someone to kind of step up and be that voice for understanding the theoretical side of music, you know. And I think if they had that, I mean, you see gospel music go places that even jazz musicians would understand.
Yeah, and just like I feel like they both have different like the same the same, like in terms of like a group, there's like they both have expression tools to like have everyone kind of get on the same page or different cues, and not just like, oh, gospel musicians can sometimes they're using tracks, like
right.
It's like they just have a, you know, like the numbers for gospel, like just a quick throw out a number, like, okay, we know like where we're moving to, okay, we're shifting, or like some of those, I don't know, like playing off of the song like jazz musicians do, like, oh, I'm gonna set this up so that the drummer knows, like, okay,
right,
that's part of the form or the head, or
Yep. Exactly.
But yeah, it's cool. It's cool that like I like that there's with, I think of Instagram especially, like the level of like cross pollination that's happening right now is interesting to watch.
It's funny because I mean, obviously we're probably around the same age. So growing up, obviously we didn't have Instagram or Facebook. MySpace came,
Yeah.
a little earlier than both of those, but it wasn't nearly as it didn't have the sharing power capabilities that obviously Instagram and Facebook does. So growing up, there was a great big divide in the sound and in the communities. But again, now, like you said, now because of social media, like the cross pollination is really starting to happen at a very fast pace. I mean, yeah, I mean, social media is definitely, I think, I hate to change the subject, but social media is kind of bringing these communities together in a sense. And not only musically, but personnel, relationship. Social media is bringing these communities together, which I think should have been together. And at one point, they were separated from the same genre. And so it's good to see these communities come back together.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like the amount of people who kind of, they feel compelled, especially like, these younger generation players that are like just monster players, super young. and like you see the people who, the older people in that sphere, in that genre or that community, they're sharing, they're raising up, they're like they're being engaged more than just like, a fire emoji here and there. Right. Like it's cool. Like going to NAMM last year, I saw it was like an intersection of like, there, like my Instagram feed, the people I follow on YouTube, and like the musicians I already knew about that I was just keeping an eye out for. So you'd see like, it's like, oh, that's a guitarist on YouTube talking to this dude near Marcus Miller, who's by that Russian kid who plays bass really well, Aaron. Like, just like, whoa, like all this, and all these people who kind of like, they might not have been like friends, but they're at least more aware of like, oh yeah, the baby drummer, the 4-year-old kid who, or like,
was he there?
Yeah, he was there. I think I saw him. I think I just saw him on the show floor. I don't know if he was like with a company or just like his dad was taking him and showing him to folks. But I did literally the first thing I saw when I walked into NAMM, I was walking into the main convention floor with, I don't know if you know Matt Ryan at all.
Yeah, I know Matt.
Yeah. So we met years ago at Blue Lake, and he got in through, not his bass endorsement, but I guess his dad works with Korg in some capacity. So he got a Korg pass. But we were like, just like kind of catching up and walking into the main convention area. And the first thing I like see and hear is, Justin Schultz with his sister and dad at the Decibel booth. And I was like, it feels like NAMM, like that thing you saw on Instagram, even though they're a real person and you've met them, like that thing that everyone follows is a real person here right now. Go say hi.
I need to go. Yeah, man. Matt Ryan, that guy.
Yep.
I mean, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say like it was cool, like to, I wish there was a way. The only thing I wish for NAMM, which is impossible, I wish there was a way to like, you're doing the networking, that's cool. You're seeing the concerts here and there. You're seeing demos. You're trying gear. It's just the volume of noise is insane. It's like being in like a convention center that's like filled with every Guitar Center next to every club, next to like, like a drum shed. It's just like all swirling at different volumes all over the place. It's like
I wonder if there's any way to like mitigate some of that, where I don't know their structure, but I mean, it's probably not. I mean,
it's weird. They do have a noise police that'll, like, if your booth gets too crazy, they'll shut it down for the day or sometimes for the whole thing. But it's really like the enforcement's weird because, like, you know, a DJ booth could be running for 2 hours and not have anyone show up, but then someone at the Tonewood acoustic booth is like playing a solo acoustic set through a PA, and they're like, "Hey, cut it, shut it down." It's like, but there's 8, 40-year-olds at the bass booth slapping bass.
Really?
It's like,
wow.
Yeah. So it's like really like up and down. And sometimes I think it might have to do a little bit with like real estate. Like they're not going to shut down a huge booth that has like a big sponsorship presence, but they are going to mitigate some of the smaller tier ones just to do something. But I don't know.
So politics, that's cool.
Yeah, they like cut off a drummer at the Drumeo booth. I mean, he was a gospel drummer, like just going at it, like everyone was digging it, and then one of the reps comes over. It's all on video too. He's like, "Hey man, we gotta shut it down." He's like, "Oh really?" He's like, "Okay, bye. I'm done."
Wow.
And you're like, that was like, midway through the song.
Well, that's not cool.
Yeah, it's like, other than those weird things, it's fun to see like all the different things interacting and just kind of, I don't know, absorb it and not I don't know, like, know that you aren't going to see everything, but the stuff you do see is like it's cool.
Yeah, I want to go so bad. I really do. I want to check it out.
Yeah, maybe you could get in through Korg.
Yeah. I'm gonna talk to Matt. Hey man, I play only Korg. You think I can get in?
Can I be a featured educator, demoer person?
Yeah, I could do that. I could totally pull that off.
Yeah.
It's funny because the last time I saw Matt, it was a recording session we were on together, and I was supposed to play my Korg Kronos. And right before the session started, my keyboard stand collapsed and went up the middle of my Korg Kronos. And I'm like, yeah, well, I can't play that today.
Well, this is broken.
Yeah, I was like, I'm totally not gonna play this now. That's funny. I didn't know his dad had Korg hookup. I would have been like, hey man, you think I can get my keyboard fixed?
Yeah. Hey, you got any extra Kronoses at your house?
I just need one.
Yeah. I know you got probably like 6. Would you like, I'll take one. Yeah, that's been the interesting shift I've seen in endorsing. I talked to a guitarist, not last fall, but 2019. We did like a organ trio gig where I used my Yamaha board and like a MIDI controller to simulate the organ. It was around the time the B3X software came out from IK Multimedia.
Yeah.
And, I saw a demo Jim Alfredson did, and like I was looking for some kind of more authentic organ sound, and they were doing like a, like, hey, we just put it out like a promotion sale, like, so it was like $50 off. And it was a fun gig, and I was talking to him because some of his students are, people in like touring rock and metal acts who kind of want to learn more jazz vocabulary and expand their chops a little bit. And they were saying how the companies that had been like, very like, yeah, whenever you need strings, whenever you need this, whenever you need that, they're starting to like not do that with as many artists because they favor, there's a little bit more of a favor to like, oh yeah, we can give this dude who really just kind of is in his house, like we'll give him a bass, and then that's less upkeep, less cost on us, but we still get the same amount of eyes on a more regular basis than certain touring acts. And I don't know if it's every company thinking that way, but it got me thinking of like, yeah, that is interesting to like, be endorsed, but like you're not like, a iconic touring artist. You're just like, a certain type of younger artist that doesn't, isn't going to be traveling as much and is mainly on socials, pops up here and there, like, but has an audience.
You know what though, man? That brings up a good conversation. I think I'm glad they're doing more things like that, because I think
Yeah.
as musicians who are trying to make a career as performers, or somewhere in the music industry, I think there's a false narrative, and that I'm sure you know this, most people do at this point, that there's either the struggling musician or there's the really successful touring guy who plays for everybody, and it's like, and those are the only two levels of music. And in fact, that's the furthest thing from the truth. It's like there's a whole lot of middle ground that, and I realized this years ago, and I'm glad I hopped on that middle ground that goes untouched. And you can make a decent living in that middle section. Nobody wants to be a struggling musician, and it gets harder and harder to hit these bigger tours. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many people out there, and life and whatever the case may be, but that middle ground, it's a great place to be, if you ask me.
Yeah, I feel like there's more flexibility in the middle ground of like, you're earning enough to like not only pay your bills, but like you feel a little bit more comfortable. You're usually it's some kind of combination of skill sets, so you feel like you're improving in different areas, and you're
Right.
able to like, feel comfortable, like, yeah, like you were saying earlier, like the people who were just performers before the pandemic hit. I've seen a lot of people who, these people who would jump on like a bunch of different bands. Now they've kind of started working on like recording, or they've started teaching, or like they've seen like, okay, I need to have something else in
Right.
case, not necessarily another pandemic happens, but like in case, like what if he or she gets like an injury, or like what if
Yeah.
they, just some other circumstance, not as many gigs booked for that month or something.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think that's the power of kind of being a musical entrepreneur versus just being a performer. I mean, yeah, it has its glitz and glam to an extent. I mean, nobody comes to see the band, so nobody knows who you are. You know what I mean? I mean, you're popular among the musician community, but that's what 0.0001% of the world. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot harder to sustain a career as a performer on a tour, because there's always new musicians coming, and no band stays the same for too long. I mean, every band is always switching and growing, and sometimes you get left behind just because of the new things they're trying to do, or the new sound, or whatever the case may be. But yeah,
Yep.
I mean, if you're this entrepreneur, you're recording, you can be a performer, you can get into to teaching, and to, I mean, so many different facets of music is available at the middle level that honestly is not available at the professional. Well, I mean, we're all professionals, but at the
Right.
touring level, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot more, there's a lot more room to like take what and like get connected into a thing more
Yeah.
quickly than trying to shoot for, I think of like, you know, the like orchestral auditions, and like how many people from all over the country or the world like travel to a different place to like, like I want to get the oboe slot. Well, there's
Mhm.
two. Like
Right.
you got to fight for it, and whoever gets it, they're gonna hold on to it probably forever.
Right. It's funny because I work as the education manager at KSL. And yeah, so I see this all the time. Like, there's the auditions come up, and they have a whole 2-3 days of auditions for one slot.
Mm.
I mean, and yeah, and a lot of these people at the KSO have been there for 20 plus years. I mean, they're not giving up those gigs. I mean, those are hard gigs to come by anyway. So
Yeah. Well, and I see like, because I have three uncles on my dad's side who are all, they all did their masters and 2 of them did their doctorates in music.
Oh,
And so I see like, you know, the one uncle who's in, you know, he teaches at Central Washington. He's a horn professor, and like he also double majored in math for a master's, so he can teach that kind of course. So he's really into the academia side and like what that opens up for his career. And then like my Massachusetts uncle is kind of like, his life is kind of like a mixing board, where it's like, okay, my doctorate's in composition and I, you know, I'll write for certain groups or dance companies, or I'll teach, or I'll, you know, I run a recording studio out of my house. Like he's able to like kind of adjust what he wants to do. And then I have an uncle in Florida who plays actually oboe for the Naples Philharmonic. And so I see like that angle where he's like, yeah, this is home base, the orchestra job, and then whatever else I want to do, outreach, clinics, private students, like he's able to like use that foundation as like a way to get into doing other things. So yeah. It's a lot of options. Obviously they, you know, college professors also kind of you know, people hang on to that for as long as they want to hang on to it, or they get tenure and they just never leave.
I mean, yeah, there's, I mean, that level of stability, you know, but
yeah,
you know, I think essentially it's always, I've never seen anybody stay in any position, whether it's on the stage, in the classroom, for too long and see it done successfully. And I just think because naturally music is always evolving, we're always growing. But you know, it's funny because I was just talking to the music director at my church today about this. It's like there's a time when you have to learn to be able to let it go, and not necessarily for you, but for the sake of the people that you're affecting by your music, whether on the stage or in the classroom. You know, there's going to come a time where the things that are hip now that I know are no longer going to be the thing. But by me staying in this position, like I'm not allowing the people who are going to come under me to really grow, you know.
right.
It's not that I can't grow with it, but I think there is a time frame and an expiration date that usually goes unnoticed by most people in positions of I mean, we look at Western. I mean, I love those guys, but what they're doing is not jazz today.
Right.
You know, it's cool. It's very cool. I love them. They sound great.
Yep.
But they're not going to attract the players who are trying to be on the jazz scene today, because what they're doing is not today's jazz.
Yeah. And even like, you know, because I studied, and I think, yeah, you and me had kind of the same like masters. Yeah, we both started and finished at the same time. And so we each got like, I mean, you had studied with Siskind longer than me, but I had a year with Siskind and a year with Freeze, both great players, both very different approaches to the same art form, both very different. Like if you were to jot down like professional careers and like what led to those points, very different.
Right.
And, you know, I see what Siskind's doing, and I'm probably going to have him on this podcast at some point. Because there's so many, I've seen what he's been doing with like, you know, he's got just like so many tools in his arsenal for solo piano, and just, you know, taking familiar songs and restructuring them, but then also advertising that against like stuff he'll make for FGH publishing, which when I went to Grand Valley, the person who's taught all of my undergrad, like, you know, piano lit and like coordinated the accompanying schedules and all that, Helen Marley, she's an editor for FJH publishing. So I've just kind of like seen how that method and the supplemental stuff works. But to see like, you know, Siskind kind of stepping a little bit more into the educator spotlight. Not that he wasn't already, I guess, but even more so with the move. That's a level of music entrepreneurship that it feels more realistic to the environment of like, yeah, yes, you have a teaching job and you do have, resources in a community, but you can always apply those and reach other communities and other spheres and like tie that, it's all like cross promoting what like, oh, I teach some students and they might go check out my music and then they'll share my music with some friends and they might be in a city I'm going to go tour. Like it all, even though it seems like different things, it all feels cohesive.
Oh yeah. I mean, and you know what? I think there's a thing about schools anyway that really don't, unfortunately, teach musicians how to be entrepreneurs in this world. They teach them how to play well.
Yep.
And a lot of them end up playing at the local club for 50 years. Very well, mind you.
Right.
At the local club. It's like we don't really prepare, at least in academia, we don't really prepare our students to be working musicians. We just prepare them to be good sounding musicians.
Yeah, it's almost like you're preparing them to be. It's like like storytelling. Like it's like we're passing on the knowledge. All right, you go tell other people, and the cycle repeats itself. Right. But somewhere, someone's gonna have to learn how to reach someone on TikTok. I don't know. Something.
I mean, even the basic things like, hey, go book a gig.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know how to book a gig. Simple stuff like that. Don't have a press kit, and these are things that it's weird. It's weird that you would think a school would teach you how to do that, but a lot of schools do not have classes for music entrepreneurs, or for musicians in general. All musicians need to take it if they plan on being performers.
Yeah, and that's was interesting about the B-side sessions that like the Michigan Music Alliance has been putting on. They're in this, I think it's the second season of them, but the one I watched earlier this month had like, it was focused on social media and, all different types. Like this lady works for a talent agency with some legacy artists. So a lot of her clients already have the audience and she can just kind of direct market to that. And it's enough to, like she was making like the artist was making like 50,000 just off of merch on Facebook. And it's like, okay, when you have however many thousands of people, like that makes more sense than a little guy. But then there were the people who, there was a guy from Syracuse University who that's part of what he teaches is social media to musicians. And even, to the point where he's like using what he's teaching on TikTok to like make a significant income each month to pay back his student loans. And I'm like, if a dude in his like late 30s, I think he was, like, could get on a platform that's so, you feel like it's so geared towards a certain generation and like make enough money to like help pay off debt. Like, why can't somebody do it that doesn't have,
right,
that kind of academic pool or student body influence or whatever? Like,
yeah. You know what? Being a musician in 2021, I think is definitely going to require a level of business understanding, and understanding like a lot of people even use social media and have no idea how to use social media. They just think, hey, let me post a bunch of stuff and that's going to get me somewhere. It's like, in fact, you got to have a strategy. Now, I will say this. I didn't know that until my wife told me. She is a communications and marketing officer. So she's the one who told me, like, yeah, that's not how you use social media. She like went to Georgetown for it too. So it's like she really knows what she's talking about. Yeah. I'm like, oh, all you gotta do is just post a bunch of stuff and people eventually find you. Like, nah, it's not quite how that works. But a lot of people don't know that. Really,
right.
Social media is just post a bunch of videos and
you go viral and you win.
And then, I'm not really a technology guy unless it's like music technology. Then it's like, oh, I know everything about that. But it's like, hey, Instagram and TikTok. Yeah, I don't know anything about that though. But it's like you have to really understand like the level of engagement that needs to happen, and like these are things that I think music schools are already archaic. But as time goes on, they're getting more and more stuck in a terrible tradition. I mean, social media obviously needs to be something. Learning how to sell merch, these are things that need to be taught in classes, you know, especially as more artists are being independent. Labels aren't real. I mean, they're a thing, but they're not really a thing, you know.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a label doing all this work for you, how the heck do you expect for it to get done, you know?
It's so true. Like, because that's been the talk with Earth Radio. I mean, we're only in our going into our, well, I guess this would be our fourth year in August. It'll be our fourth year as a group. And we've, had those conversations of like, well, we need to get a boost in how we promote outside of our market. Like, how do we get the money or the resources to do that? Can we sign with a label? And I've seen the people like this metal band Periphery. They didn't sign with a label for years because they could handle distribution. They had a promotion strategy. Each member had even if someone was like, well, I'm not really that adept at promotion, but I do clinics, or like, I'm not really that adept at this, but I teach on the road, or I do drum work as a session musician. They all figured out how to create their own brand that attracted the right kind of offers for when they needed to do overseas distribution or they needed funding for tours. Then it wasn't like, oh, we're signing away our rights. It was, we already have 3 albums worth of material under our belt that people dig, and we're using that to get the deals we want to expand the business.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, man, I really wish, conversations like this, I think, is extremely valuable for young artists. I mean, I have a lot of young artist friends who are killing, but it's I wish I could point them in the right direction of trying to figure out how to be relevant in 2021 using the resources and tools that we use in 2021. Because me, unfortunately, I have an archaic model as well. And it's not that I can't do a more traditional or more modern model of using social media, but my model weirdly works for me. You know what I mean? That's how I get most of my gigs, is by word of mouth. And people don't see me on something. There's videos obviously up there, but I've never posted a video of myself on YouTube or Facebook for that matter. But they're out there. But it's more of that word of mouth model that works for me. But I also am very aware that, one, that motto is extremely stupid, and two, it's eventually that luck is gonna run out for me for one day. I'm gonna have, you know what I mean? But I'm aware of these things, so I'm preparing myself. But a lot of people aren't preparing themselves. Even older musicians aren't preparing themselves to be relevant in 2021. And I don't know, maybe that's something you could do, man. Like a nice music summit where musicians from all over Michigan can come learn from you how to be relevant, man.
Yeah, that would be cool, especially since the Michigan Music Alliance recently, they've announced kind of their, it's like West Michigan based, but it's obviously trying to include, all these other, obviously the East Side state market. And there's some people in there. I don't know if they've been announced yet, and I don't know even who. I'm not involved in the nitty gritty with that. I just know, Shane German, he worked in the industry for however many years. He's the station manager or station programmer at WICE, but he's got he's opened for artists on tour. He's worked in publication. He's been a promoter. He has a lot of knowledge. Or I don't know, Chris Newberg, who plays in Gunner and the Grizzly Boys. He's been helping me because he's a lawyer, and he's able to say, I've been working on the trademark for Earth Radio, and he's been able to help connect the dots of okay, you need to contact this person and ask for this type of stuff, and then we'll follow it up with this document and we'll have him sign it, and then it's sweet, I don't need to learn legalese to figure it out.
You know what, man, that's like a whole nother conversation. I mean, there's like the music business. I don't want to say business because business is technically all of it, but there's like
Right.
promotion and all that stuff, booking. But then there's like the level of music business that if you don't understand it, you'll go to jail, like taxes. You know what I mean? Like a lot of musicians, like they play great music and they're getting paid for gigs and don't understand, you know, the financial part of this and how to sustain a career as a musician with a specific budget and like what needs to be paid in taxes and what, you know, like should you become a LLC or you know like all these things. I mean, I have an LLC, so for me that works. Or you know, should I create a nonprofit, which is a whole nother conversation, but you know what I mean. But it's like what musicians can't do is play gigs forever and,
Right,
like never pay taxes, because you know what I mean. Like you need to know to pay taxes, or if you're an independent, you know, contractor, is like, well, you may need to pay quarterly because you're making so much, or you're gonna be getting a big check at the end of, you know, it's like you gotta like, these are things that people just don't know in music. And yeah, again, I go back to school should be teaching this.
yeah. It's good. Yeah, helping to figure out, like, I think of all the time, like I got good at my instrument because I was in the practice room, but you know, there's like, I turned 28 back in September, and when I like had my birthday, I'm like, all right, 30 is coming up. What do I want to learn so that when I get to 30, I have 10 years of this, like
Right.
these certain things happening that I didn't do in my 20s.
Exactly.
Like, and yeah, finance, being better with finances is definitely at the top of that list, because it all just, it's the only trickle down economics.
Right.
It's not the other trickle down. It's if I have money, I can invest it or use it wisely. I'm able to do the things I want to do, and it affects everything.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, man. A lot of good things. We're at the hour mark. I don't know if you needed to do, you said you had a busy day or something, or
Yeah, I got a meeting in a few minutes.
Well, then perfect. We covered a lot of things.
I got one more question for you though.
Sure, yeah.
It'll take like 1 minute. What gear do you use? Like what's your gear? Like?
Yeah, so the gear it's definitely like it's a hodgepodge of stuff. Like when I go on stage with Earth Radio, this will kind of be the 2021 setup, because it just keeps getting tweaked. But I still have my Yamaha CP33. It's, I've had it since 9th grade, and it's just held on. I would like to get something a little bit more versatile, but I like how, the action, and it just can take a beating. And that is that, and I have a Micro Korg XL, and then a Moog Sub Fatty. But with the Micro Korg, I chain it with MIDI, so I can mix in and out layers for like pads or for lead stuff or for another texture. Because all of the audio goes through the Key Largo.
Oh yeah.
And that has been great to just have as keep it on the Yamaha. I can connect, multiple things. And I recently just got a laptop media stand, so I can incorporate Keyscape or Omnisphere, just trying to add more sounds to that same box. But all of that, goes through the Key Largo. And pedals I use right now, I've been using 4 pedals because with the Key Largo there's the effects chain. I've been using the Generation Loss, which normally you can buy from Cooper Effects, but I have the version that is like Chase Bliss Audio Cooper Effects. It's basically Cooper Effects makes this unit that's kind of like a lo-fi machine. You can add different tape hiss or kind of a chorusy warble or a lo-fi, turning different filters. And then Chase Bliss basically put it in their form factor, which all their pedals have like 2 different channels, layers of like knobs, and then dip switches all on the back if you really want to like go crazy with customizing a sound. But yeah, like that one. And then the Caverns from Keeley Electronics. It's like just having a reverb and delay with some options. And I just got for my birthday a Count to 5 from Montreal Assembly, and it's like a micro looper layering cool thing, pitch shifting. That one's been great for like extra texture and sparkle and weird stuff. And at the end of the chain, right now, it was actually my payment for working NAMM last year, because I went to NAMM through Cusack Music. I helped work their booth. I think 2 out of the 3 days I was there on the show floor. Oh, sweet. And they put out the pedals, the Dream Mender, and it's a Memory Man clone. So it's like the Memory Man, but in like a much smaller form factor. And I love it for like another like wider, more varying delay or chorusy sound. I used it a ton on a trio album I did recently with my friend Ian Thompson and Nathan Coles. Just like adding spacey sounds. But yeah, all of it feeds through the key Largo, and I can flip things on and off and
that's awesome.
Chain things together. It's fun. I bet. And what have you been using? I guess real quick before.
my locker is a lot less engaging, I think. I'm primarily Korg, so I have a Korg Kronos. The good thing about the Kronos is, the sounds in there are just massive. I have like a pedal board built into the Kronos, so I can, you can add pedals and all that. I have a Triton that I never use because my Kronos just kind of does everything I need. If I need a second keyboard, I'll pull it out, but it's rare. I have a Yamaha Motif, but because I primarily Korg, I don't really use it. It's kind of like a keyboard I use at home. I have an 88 key Fender Rhodes built in 73 suitcase. Again, it's heavy, so it does not leave my house. And then I have 2 Hammond organs. I have an A100 with a 710 Leslie, and then I have a C3 with a 147 Leslie. So, again, neither one of those leave my house. So the only thing that I actually really use is my Kronos.
Yeah.
And occasionally Motif sparingly.
Yeah. Sometimes that's especially with all the original sounds you have, like it's way easier to take the thing that you can kind of distill everything into rather than needing
that was the point of buying the Kronos too. It's like, okay, I can do everything for every genre that I need to do with this Kronos, except for gospel. It's terrible for gospel. I don't know why. Like, everything on the keyboards is terrible. So for stuff, if I have to bring a keyboard, which is very rare for gospel, I'll bring a Motif. But for everything else, the Kronos does the job, man.
Nice.
But I want a montage.
Yeah. Oh yeah, those are great. But yeah, I guess, again, thanks for coming on the podcast and all that. Great chatting with you. I'm sure we'll be chatting again at some point this year. And I know you even just said like, oh, I don't really post a lot of my stuff, but where could people find you if maybe they want to, you're in Detroit and Kalamazoo, like what things do you work with? Where can they find you or hear you? All that good stuff. If
you want to find me professionally, you can locate me with Kalamazoo Symphony Orchestra. I'm the the education manager there. I occasionally write music for the orchestra. I just did actually wrote a piece for the Christmas concert for jazz piano orchestra. So that's on YouTube. You should be able to check it out.
Yeah.
I'm the director of community partnerships at Jazz and Creative Institute in Kalamazoo. You can find me there. You can find me on YouTube. Just type in Rufus Ferguson, and more videos than I would like will pop up. You can't find me on Facebook. I do use Facebook. I'm not an Instagram person though. And Rufus Ferguson Music, you can find me on as well as my website. It's under construction, but it should be there, I'm sure.
Cool. Yeah, and anyone listening after the fact, if you like the conversations, you can go to patreon.com/Dutcher Snedeker. That's where you can support efforts like these and get access to episodes early, these kind of, behind the scenes things, before and after episodes, and where you can also hire me to do things. I got a student, first student, so we got that. Thanks again, and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and it's Monday. Hope it's a good day.